Most people hear the phrase emergency fund and think it means one simple thing: save some money for a rainy day. But if you are in your 40s, it is not that simple anymore. Because by this point in life, you may have a mortgage, kids, medical bills, car repairs, family responsibilities, job pressure, and maybe even aging parents depending on your situation. So when people say, just save 3 months of expenses, that advice can feel way too vague. And when other people say you need a full year of expenses, that can feel completely impossible. So what is the real answer? How much emergency fund do you actually need in your 40s? That is what we are going to break down today. Not in a scary way, not in a confusing way, and not in some one-size-fits-all way that ignores your real life. Because the truth is, the right emergency fund depends on your income, your responsibilities, your expenses, and how much risk you are carrying. And by the end of this video, you should have a much better idea of what number makes sense for you. Why this matters more in your 40s. Your 40s are often a very expensive decade. A lot of people at this stage are dealing with more financial pressure than ever before. You may be supporting kids, you may be paying for a home, you may be helping family, you may be trying to catch up on retirement. You may be dealing with health changes, insurance increases, or surprise costs that did not exist in your 20s or early 30s. And here's the big issue. The older you get, the more expensive surprises seem to become. A car repair is not just inconvenient anymore. It can seriously throw off your entire month. A medical bill is not just annoying anymore. It can turn into a major setback. A job loss is not just stressful anymore. It can affect your mortgage, your family, your savings, and your future plans all at once. That is why emergency savings matter so much in your 40s. It is not just a financial category. It is protection. It is breathing room. It is the difference between a temporary problem and a financial disaster. Why the usual advice is not enough? You have probably heard the standard advice before. Save 3 to 6 months of expenses. And to be fair, that is not bad advice. But it is not the full story. Because 3 months of expenses for one person might be fine. For another person, 3 months would barely do anything. That is why emergency funds need context. A single person with a stable salary, low fixed expenses, and no dependents may not need the same amount as a family of 4 with a mortgage and one variable income. That is exactly why this topic deserves a real conversation. You do not need the average emergency fund. You need the right one for your life. Step 1. Figure out your essential monthly expenses. The first thing you need to do is calculate your essential monthly expenses. Not your full lifestyle spending, just the basics. These are the expenses your household would still need even if life got tight. That usually includes housing, utilities, groceries, transportation, insurance, minimum debt payments, and basic household essentials. You are not counting vacation money here. You are not counting shopping money. You are not counting the things you could pause if needed. You are just figuring out the minimum amount required to keep life functioning. This number matters because it gives you a real starting point. For example, if your essential expenses are $4,000 a month, then 3 months equals $12,000, 6 months equals $24,000, and 12 months equals $48,000. That is a wide range, and that wide range is exactly why the right amount depends on your situation. When a smaller emergency fund makes sense. Let's say you are still getting stable. Maybe you are paying off debt. Maybe you don't have much saved yet. Maybe your income is solid, but you are also trying to catch up in other areas. In that case, starting smaller is okay. A lot of people think they are failing if they don't have a huge emergency fund. That's not true. If you are still in the early stages of rebuilding, even $1,000 or 1 month of expenses can make a huge difference.
Why? Because it prevents small problems from turning into bigger ones. A flat tire, a broken appliance, a surprise bill, a school expense, a medical copay, a late week cash shortage. These are the kinds of things that can push people straight into credit card debt if they do not have any cushion. So if you are behind, do not get stuck thinking you need the perfect number before you can start. Start with a first target. That first target matters more than people realize, when you probably need more. Now let's talk about the other side of it. When do you need a bigger emergency fund? Usually when your life has more risk, and a lot of people in their 40s do. You may need more savings if your income is variable, you are self-employed, you are the only income earner, you have kids, you own a home, you have older vehicles, your job feels uncertain, or your health situation adds more financial risk. In other words, the more moving parts your life has, the more money you probably need sitting in reserve. For example, if your income changes from month to month, a small emergency fund may not feel like enough. If you work commission-based or freelance, a bigger reserve gives you stability during slower periods. If you own a home, one repair can wipe out a small fund quickly. If you have dependents, the cost of a disruption is higher. So for many people in their 40s, 6 months of essential expenses is a very reasonable target, and in some cases, more may be appropriate. A simple way to decide your target. If you are trying to figure out your own number, here is a simple way to think about it. You may want a small emergency fund if your income is stable, your job is secure, your expenses are low, and you do not have many dependents. You may want a medium emergency fund if
your household has moderate obligations, you have a mortgage or kids, and you want to be protected without oversaving cash. You may want a larger emergency fund if your income changes, your job is less stable, you are self-employed, you support dependents, or a financial shock would hit your household hard. That is the practical answer. Not 3 months for everyone, not 12 months for everyone, just a target that matches your reality. What counts as an emergency? This is important because if you are going to build an emergency fund, you need to know what it is for. A real emergency is unexpected, necessary, and urgent. That could be a job loss, a major medical bill, a serious car repair, a home repair that cannot wait, urgent travel for a family situation, or a sudden disruption in income. Those are the things emergency savings is meant to cover. The point is to keep your life stable when something unexpected happens. What should not come from the emergency fund? Let's be honest about what does not count. A vacation is not an emergency. Holiday shopping is not an emergency. A new phone is not an emergency. Furniture is not an emergency. Routine maintenance is not an emergency. And if you knew the expense was coming for months, it probably should not come from emergency savings either. That does not mean the expense is unimportant. It just means it belongs in another category. This is one of the biggest problems people have with money. Everything gets thrown into one bucket, and then they wonder why they never feel prepared. A good financial system separates emergency money from planned money. Now, there is another side to this conversation that people do not always talk about. Sometimes people keep too much money in cash. And while cash is important, too much sitting idle can slow down your progress. If you have way more money in emergency savings than your life really requires, you may be missing opportunities to pay off high-interest debt, invest for retirement, build sinking funds, or put money toward long-term goals. So the goal is balance. You do not want to be underprotected, but you also do not want to trap too much money in a place where it is not serving your bigger plan. That is why the right emergency fund is usually a range, not a random huge number. Real-life examples. Let's make this more practical. Imagine a married couple in their 40s with 2 kids, a mortgage, one stable income, and one income that fluctuates a little. That household probably needs a stronger emergency fund than a single renter with a steady salary and low expenses. Why? Because the family has more responsibility, more bills, more potential disruptions, and more risk if one income gets interrupted. Now imagine someone who is single, rents an apartment, has no dependents, and works in a stable job. That person may not need as large a reserve. Their risk exposure is lower. Now imagine a freelancer in their 40s with a regular income. That person likely needs even more than average because their cash flow is unpredictable. Same age, different lives, different targets. That is the key. How to build it without getting overwhelmed. If the full number feels intimidating, do not let that stop you. Build it in stages. Start with a first goal. Then go to 1 month, then 2 months, then 3, then 6 if your situation justifies it. And make the process automatic if possible. Even a small transfer every payday can add up over time. That is the part a lot of people underestimate. They think emergency funds are built with huge one-time contributions. Sometimes they are, but more often they are built with consistency, a little at a time, repeated over months, sometimes years. That is how financial protection actually happens. What to do if you are behind. If you are in your 40s and feel behind, I want to say this clearly. You are not too late, but you do need to be intentional. Do not wait for the perfect time to start. Do not wait until everything else is paid off. Do not wait until life gets easier. Life may not get easier. That is why the emergency fund matters.
Start with the number that makes sense for your current season. If that is $1,000, start there. If that is 1 month of expenses, start there. If that is 3 months, Great. If your situation calls for 6 months, work toward that. The right answer is the one that gives you real protection and real progress. Final framework. So here is the simplest way to think about it. In your 40s, your emergency fund should probably be somewhere between 1 and 6 months of essential expenses, depending on your situation. If your life is stable, your income is predictable, and your applications are manageable, the lower end may be enough for now. If your life is more complex, your income is less predictable, or your family depends heavily on your paycheck, the higher end probably makes more sense. The best emergency fund is not the biggest one. It is the one that actually protects you without slowing down the rest of your financial life. So if you have been wondering whether you have too much or too little saved, the real question is not just the amount. It is whether that amount matches your life. Your emergency fund should give you peace of mind. It should help you handle the unexpected, and it should fit into the bigger picture of your finances. If you are in your 40s, do not copy someone else's number. Build the number that makes sense for your income, your household, your responsibilities, and your goals. That is how you stay protected without getting stuck. And that is how you build a financial cushion that actually works in real life. Your emergency fund does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be enough for your life.